Hey, JD here. Welcome to the Mead House. You know, over the past several years, we've brought you over 150 episodes of mead making education, information, and entertainment. More than 100 guests have stopped by the Mead House, professional mead makers, medal-winning home mead makers, competition organizers, experts on yeast and honey, and brewers just like you and me have all visited to share their knowledge. Hey, the Mead House is produced for home mead makers and brewers looking for a bit of inspiration and information from the many guests and discussions we have here at the house. You can help support the Mead House by joining the Mead House Keyholder Club on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for the Mead House. There's also a link in the show notes. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a keyholder. We've teamed up with some great companies to provide thank you gifts for your support. So get on over to Patreon, join the Mead House Keyholder Club, and get your own set of keys to the Mead House. You can listen to the Mead House podcast with your favorite player, and be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite listening venue. The Mead House, mead making entertainment you just don't want to miss. Hey, welcome to the Mead House, and thanks for listening to episode number 191. You know, I was just mowing the lawn and raking the leaves when Jeff and Ryan motored up, and I'll probably have to clean out the basement and change the kitty litter after they leave. Wait, I didn't even know we had a cat. Oh, well. Hey, my name is JD Webb, and you're at the Mead House. Hey, the Mead House podcast, it's everywhere. Check the front page of the website. I ain't going to go through the whole list again and again and again. TheMeadHouse.com. There's just a dozen places out there. Also, if you check the episode on the website, click on the episode number. There's also a little subscribe deal under there. You can subscribe to the various places that we upload or that the podcast is available at. Make sure you do that. And rate us 5 stars everywhere you go out there. iTunes, Stitcher, no matter what. So, hey, in this episode, this is directly from their website, and I dig this. Okay, it kind of has a kind of a special meaning to me. I'll get to that here in a minute. Quote, the Queen's skyline is marked by the 4 Ravenswood red and white generator stacks. The largest of these generators was built by the Milwaukee-based company Alice Chalmers. In 1963, they operated the world's largest generator, producing enough units to serve 3 million people, acknowledging a large population it served at the time. The Queens community nicknamed the generator Big Alice. Our name honors a Queens landmark and connects us with the history and growth of our borough and immediate neighborhood of Long Island City. You know, Alice Chalmers didn't only make generators. They made damn good farm equipment, too. Just thought I'd throw that in as an old farmer from Colorado. But I dig the reference to Big Alice on Long Island. That is so cool. However, this isn't about a couple of smokestacks or farm tractors. It's actually about a craft brewery that started out doing one-off brews, something we talked about last week, if you remember. And we'll talk to John Kilty from Big Alice Brewing Company here in just a bit. But hey, happy St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, I know it's early. But you know, it's right around the corner, and I'm sure they're already filling the kegs with the green beer by now. So let's talk green for a bit in segment 2. The green I'm talking about is mint. All kinds of things go with mint. How about a mead or a braggot? We'll get into that in segment 2. And then, of course, the social club. This is where we try to answer questions from mead makers with no formal expertise other than what we have been brewing in our own brew house. All that and more here at the Mead House. But hey, first, thank you to all of the Mead House key holders. You know who you are out there. You guys help keep the Mead House podcast free. And you too, as a new listener, or if you're an old listener, you can help us out as well. Support the show for as little as $2 a month. We've got some great thank you gifts to send out to you. Plus, a listing of key holder only content. So get on over to patreon.com, search for the Mead House, or just click in the link in the show notes. That's the easiest thing to do. Hey, what are we drinking tonight? Hey, I'm double fisting it tonight. I got a mead in one hand, and it's also Tequila Tuesday at my house. So let's start out with the mead. I'm doing one from Sap House. This is Hey Jealousy. This is a gin barrel aged, I believe 10 months mead from Sap House. And I'm not a gin drinker, but this could make me one. I think I said that before the last time I tried this on the show. Mm. Mm-mm-mm. Oh man, I'm telling you, it's got gin written all over it. At least during the barrel aging, those barrel components that come out in it. There's a level of sweetness here that I mean, the balance is just perfect. A little bit of tartness, that little bit of sweetness, the complexity of the barrel. Now, like I said, I'm not a gin drinker, but I could easily become one after I polish this bottle off. This is again from South House Meadery. Hey, jealousy. Good offering there, Evan. I don't know if Ash had anything to do with it, but I know Evan did. In my other hand is Dos Artes Reserva Especial. This is an extra añejo tequila. Now you can get this bottle of fine tequila at Costco. I don't remember what it costs. It's under $100. But this is really good stuff. A little on the sweet side for an extra añejo. Mm-hmm. Oh my! But this is definitely I'm not sure if it's a top shelf, but it's damn close. But all of the barrel stuff. I mean, typically bourbon barrel when you're talking aged tequilas, extra añejos. A lot of that barrel complexity, the caramels, the brown sugars, the vanillas, even you can get some of that barrel char coming through. But the on the other side of it, of course, this is an agave. This is distilled from agave, so 100% agave. We talked about that last week too. It's all 100% agave, but you do get some of that agave flavor coming through a little bit. And this is just a really fine sipper. Again, this is for Ryan. This is not a margarita tequila. He knows what I'm talking about. We went through that last week too. You can catch that on last week's episode. But hey, this is an outstanding tequila, Dos Artes Reserva Especial. You can pick it up at Costco for under $100. Really good stuff. I'm enjoying it. Hey, Jeff. What'd you put in your glass tonight, bud?
Well, I am drinking two meads tonight, one of my own and one of someone else's.
There you go.
My first glass is one of my, this is my lavender blossom with the kvike that I made last year. Mm. And at the time, I was pretty well convinced this was one of the best things I had ever made.
Wow.
And it is still pretty good. It is losing a little bit of that kvike character to it with time, and it's not quite a year old at this point. I think probably 8 months or so. So it does have a shelf life to it, but that lavender blossom is still hanging out. It gives it an interesting earthy and really, really floral kick to it, especially like that the mid to late palate. And when you take a breath in after drinking it, it's like, whoa, like a whole garden just went down my throat.
Wow.
In my other glass, I have a bottle that came courtesy of Ryan again. This one is just marked 2019 MVP Iron B bottle. So I take it this was somebody's entry into the MVP back in 2019. That was our mint, vanilla, and pine challenge.
There you go.
And I figured this is a great night to break that out since we're going to be talking about mint.
How fitting, huh?
And, this one is almost 2 years old now. Interestingly enough, the flavor that comes through the most at this point is the vanilla. I get a little bit of pine, again, kind of towards that late palate, but the mint I'm almost finding myself searching for. So that was something I was curious about as to whether, if you overdo it with the mint, if that can calm down, if it'll kind of fade as we go through. So just more research to talk about later in the show.
Awesome. Sounds good. Ryan, what did you put in your cup tonight? Oh, by the way, Jeff, I want to ask you about why do you think that Kavika's fading? Why do you think that is?
My guess is it's probably some kind of esters or other volatile aromatics that the yeast threw, and in the process of aging, those just kind of like decompose, or they otherwise kind of fade away. And
do you remember what temperature you fermented? Was that one of the high temp ferments? Or
yeah, this was actually one of the extremely high temps. I was trying for about 100 even, and at one point, because I had just a heat wrap on the fermenter and a towel trying to keep it a little bit warmer, it actually spiked at 116.
Wow. You think the high heat ferment might have had anything to do with it, or no?
Well, it was tasting pretty good out of the fermenter.
Yeah.
I know that the high heat definitely encourages more of those esters that we're looking for with that characteristic Fike flavor.
Yeah.
So I definitely pushed those hard, and there's a lot more of them to go away now. So I don't know. This is another one of those points where we're just gonna have to research, because I don't think generally the people brewing Kvike in Norway and Sweden are really putting this stuff down and holding on to it for several years. It sounds like they're drinking it up as fast as they're making it.
Yeah. All right, good enough. Ryan, what did you put in your cup tonight, bud?
So last week I was talking about margaritas.
Yep.
And I was talking about a very simple but a very, very good margarita mix that I make. And it's very simple. One cup of fresh squeezed lime juice. I mean, get lime, get like half a dozen limes and squeeze them yourself. And 1 cup of good water, the filtered water or bottled water, some really good tasting water.
Yeah.
And then a half a cup of I said orange blossom honey. And then I said, you want to do roughly 2 parts tequila, 1 part Grand Marnier, 2 parts that mix.
Yeah.
And it's like a little sweeter, a little less sweet, a little boozier. You can kind of decide how you want to do that, but it's good. Well, I got talking to some folks talking to me about that recipe, and they heard it, and we started getting talking here about, well, how can you tweak that? How can you make that formula essentially a Ryan Braggett? And so, well, okay, I said orange blossom honey, but what if you wanted to just add a little more depth or a little different character to your margarita? What if you used mesquite honey instead of orange blossom?
Oh, there you go.
Or what if you used buckwheat honey instead of it? And and instead of doing 8 ounces, or I guess a cup, instead of doing a cup of lime juice, what if you did 6 ounces of lime juice and 2 ounces of orange juice? Yeah. Or 6 ounces of lime juice and 2 ounces of grapefruit juice? What if you did, what if you ended up doing 6 ounces of lime juice, 2 ounces grapefruit juice, and a half a cup of mesquite honey? And then you use that as your mix. What would that do? So I've been playing around a little bit with that, and I think that I'd love to hear what Meat House Nation, what you guys are doing for your mixes as you play around with those, because I think that it's a great formula, and it lends itself really easy to play around with. Mm-hmm. So all right, so JD. A very, very, very good friend of ours. This guy is a top executive chef in Minneapolis, which is a great culinary city.
Absolutely.
This guy he's run a couple of kitchens. A couple of really nice, executive chefs at some really very nice restaurants. Top quality kitchens here. And he is Mexican. He grew up just outside of Mexico City, and goes back there, has family there, and stays in contact with that and all that stuff, and makes just and his wife is just an amazing bartender, and was asking them, they love margaritas, so having this world class restaurant, top bar, and their margaritas. And I said, what do you use? What grade of tequila are you using in your?
Oh my
your
God! Here we go.
Just, what do you guys use?
Yeah, I know where this is going.
And he goes, Anejo.
Anejo. Oh my God. Well, okay, yeah, I'll give you that. All right. I mean, there are some. I haven't had an anejo yet. Of course, I'm very particular about my tequilas. Okay. I haven't had an anejo yet that I would throw into a margarita. I'm just not that guy. Okay. When it comes to my bourbons and my tequilas, my anejos, extra anejos, even some reposados, I wouldn't even throw into a margarita. However, I think a Cazadores reposado makes an excellent margarita. There are just some things that you just don't mix with lime juice. And I got a few bottles on my top shelf of my tequila shelf that, nope, it ain't ever going into a margarita. But I'll give you that. I mean, I'm sure that there are some anejos out there that are not up to my par that I might throw into a shaker full of lime juice and Grand Marnier, Grand Marnier, whatever, some kind of orange liqueur, and throw it over some ice with a little lime wedge. I'll give you that. But anyway, what are you drinking tonight?
So yeah, and so I had a couple of different cocktails tonight. I'll get into what I'm drinking a little bit later here when we bring our guest in.
All right.
Let's just say cocktail night went to have been very JD approved tonight. Cocktail hour was slumming it, as JD might say here, and it was out of a red Solo cup, just for good measure.
Oh man, good deal.
As JD said, our guest tonight is John Kelty of Big Alice Brewing. John is the head brewer and production manager, a licensed New York State farm brewery in New York City. So yes, there is a farm brewery in New York City. John oversees all brewing operations at their brewery in Queens, as well as all barrel aging operations at the brewery's barrel room in Brooklyn. So we're covering a few of the boroughs here. Let's see, maybe they keep bees on Staten Island or something, just to kind of round it out. John also volunteers with Master Beekeeper Wilk Apiary, where the brewery sponsors a hive on a rooftop at an urban farm gardens 2 blocks from the brewery in Queens. Oh, so close. I thought we were gonna get to 3 or 4 boroughs. He a couple of beers that caught my eye from these guys. Number 1, let's see, the Queen's Farmhouse. This is a farmhouse ale brewed with 100% New York State malt, hops, and honey from the Big Alice Queen's rooftop hive, fermented with yeast cultured from figs in Astoria, Queens.
Oh wow, that's something.
I didn't know that figs grew in Astoria, Queens. I'll tell you. It's aged in white wine barrels.
Wow.
They've got another one. This is the other one that caught my eye was a Belgian triple brewed with lemongrass, ginger, and New York honey, aged in red wine barrels. That's another one of their award winners. So a couple of good beers here. We'll kick off by talking about. Welcome to the show tonight, John. And what's in your cup tonight?
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me. I feel a little unprepared. You guys are double fisting it here. I just got my one beer, but yeah, tonight I'm sipping on our New York State Pilsner. It's a beer that's near and dear to my heart. Very straightforward, true to style Pilsner, but we brew it with 100% New York State malt and hops that are grown and processed here in New York.
Outstanding.
Excellent.
You got a refrigerator close by?
It's not too far.
Well, okay, then no problem. You'll double fist it later on.
Pilsners. I feel like I might have said this before, but Pilsners are one of those, interesting beers. You start out, drinking beer, and usually you're drinking a crappy Pilsner, and then you go from, Pilsner to, I think you've seen this chart before. It's like Pilsner, IPA, stout, sour, and then back to Pilsner. As you kind of appreciate the different beers. But good Pilsners are very excellent, excellent beers. I always enjoy a really good one with some nice bitterness behind it, and just nice clean ferment, especially as we're getting here into spring. Yeah, very excellent stuff. So John, tell us about the Queen's Farmhouse. That's only a good place to start.
Yeah, so this is a beer that we originally did for I want to say it was our 5th or 6th brewery anniversary. It was this idea we had for a while. I live in Astoria, Queens. Queens is one of the we call it a melting pot here. It's one of the most diverse places on earth. Yeah. We have such a rich population of immigrants that have come here from different countries. Early on, a large portion of those immigrants came from Greece and Italy and Croatia. And when they came from here, they would bring trimmings of their fig plants, their persimmons, their cherries with them when they took the boats over. When they got here to the U.S., they planted them in their yards. And every year when the winter hits, you'll see them still in the neighborhoods, but they'll wrap them in burlap or rugs or these different types of insulation to try and to keep these plants going over these harsh winters here and kind of try and mimic the climate from back home. But because of that, you can walk through our neighborhood and you'll just see these fig trees just growing wild in backyards. Wow. And we thought the story of this was very cool. And because we're kind of along the East River, the waterway, the different airways that kind of come over, and the different microflora that kind of float through these neighborhoods, we decided to harvest some of the figs from a tree in a backyard that belonged to a friend of ours. And then over the course of a couple months, my assistant brewer and myself started to just kind of drop it into some work, see what happens, got it going active, and slowly propagated it up. Once we got it to a good enough sample, we were able to get it to, we worked with Omega Yeast in Chicago, not too far from you guys out there. They banked that for us. And so now that's essentially our house Saison yeast. But this was kind of born from that idea. And a lot of our beers are so focused on New York State and what can we brew that's grown here. So a lot of our beers are very focused on the malt and the hops. We brew a lot with New York State honey, so this incorporated that. We aged the beer in New York State white wine barrels, but the yeast was really the only thing missing. We're brewing with New York State water, so it was how do we incorporate that last element of beer to make this truly a New York farmhouse style ale.
Keeping it local, my hat's off to you guys. I'm all about local and supporting our local farmers, everybody who helps put food on the table. So congratulations on that, John. I think that's just outstanding.
Thank you. Yeah, we're fortunate here in New York, you guys had mentioned with the intro here, we're a New York State farm brewery, and what that means, even though we're located in New York City, we're not on a farm. Being a farm brewery here in New York State is a commitment to using these ingredients that are grown here, and we're fortunate enough that our state legislators here in New York essentially incentivized breweries and cideries and wineries here with different ways to support these farmers. So while the New York State farm brewery legislation is geared toward us and the breweries, it was originally started as a way to boost agriculture here in New York. And there's been a lot of farmers that have been able to shift what they're growing and kind of make different changes that have worked to benefit us while we're also supporting them.
I know Ryan's got a ton of questions and a couple of topics he wants to talk about, but I think you mentioned, kind of an important thing here. How important is it to deal with these local folks, keeping people employed? The whole sustainability thing. How important has that become in the craft brewery business, do you think?
So while I can't speak for everyone, it's everything to me. It's what wakes me up. That's my passion. It's the bigger picture for us. I'm so grateful I get to wake up and do something I love every day. I get to make beer. It's something I'm passionate about. But it's the relationships with these different farmers and growers and maltsters, even the vintners that we get barrels from, the distillers that we get barrels from, all here in New York. It's such a cyclical. It's great. It's what kind of, it's our passion. Yeah.
I think what the craft brewery market has done for just one single crop, hops.
Sure.
It wasn't that long ago when, the only people, there were a few hop growers, and the only people buying hops was Budweiser. That list goes on and on too. But look at what just the craft brewery business has done for hop growers now, hop farmers. Just incredible. I think it's incredible. Anyway, Ryan, yeah. I didn't mean to. Go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say for sure. I agree with you 100%. And in a lot of those larger breweries were still, up till not that long ago, buying a lot of their hops from Germany and outside of the country. And now the Pacific Northwest is just littered with hop yards. And now a state like where we are in New York, we were before Prohibition, we were the leading hop grower in the country. And Prohibition hit, that took a hit, but also we had to fight through some spider mites and powdery mildew and some other things that kind of shut that down. But you're really starting to see that starting to come back now.
Amazing. Just simply amazing. Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it is very, very cool to do that. I talked on a couple episodes back about how, brewing was a part of home economics, for families, 100 years ago or so. And I don't mean, the class you take that teaches you how to fry an egg and, mend a hole in your pants. I mean, true family, home economics, the economics of your household, the finances of your household, is, most families, there are many, families, especially in different parts of the world, you'd brew your own beer. And it was, a lot of local ingredients whenever possible. So, we talked about helping beekeepers, especially local beekeepers in our areas, and help out, and buying their honey and helping them do well. And also same here. I talked about how, up by me, you can get, hops, you can get malt. I don't know if there's any yeast, like commercial yeast here, but I'm sure I could go, find a plum tree and do what John did. And, down by you, JD, I know you get a little farther to get some, to get some, some of those ingredients, but a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so very good stuff. I was like, unreal to be a part of that local economics.
Yeah.
Back to some of your brewing here, John. Tell us about how you guys, two of the things that we really like on this show. Number one is obviously honey, but we also talk barrels or wood aging quite a bit, and you've got both of those things in a couple of your beers here. So tell us a little bit about how you incorporate your honey into your recipes, and about your barrel aging.
Yeah, so we've been fortunate to work with master beekeeper Tom Wilk Apiary. He's got I don't even know how many hives throughout the city here, mostly in Queens, but he's also got hives up through the Finger Lakes. So we've worked with him kind of since we came along in 2013. Pretty much all of our honey is wildflower honey. Everything is New York State. We actually just did our first beer about a month ago with buckwheat honey, which was pretty awesome. Buckwheat, I've been wanting to do something with buckwheat for a long time, and we were finally able to get a substantial amount enough. We ended up using it in a stout, like a big stout that's now aging in bourbon barrels. But yeah, we've kind of used it at all steps. We've used it early on in the boil, directly to the kettle, just to kind of add some fermentable sugars and dry the beer out. We've used it in the whirlpool for aroma. But the big thing that we've started to shift toward that we found is best for the honey and drying that character out. We started adding it at high krausen. We'll get a day or two into fermentation. And I mean, depending on the viscosity of the honey, we'll either pour it right through the top. If the krausen is high enough, it'll usually catch a good amount of that and keep it in suspension. If the honey is pretty dense, we'll hit it with some pretty hot water just to kind of loosen it up a bit and kind of inject it through the side of the tank. But yeah, so we've been fortunate enough to work with Tom for this long, and we've been able to be pretty experimental with our honey, incorporating it into everything from IPAs to stouts. But yeah, it's I mean, the two beers that you guys have there, both barrel aged beers as well. The one I just mentioned with the buckwheat was barrel aged. That's another thing that we're passionate about is beer and wood. I mean, it's pretty awesome the different things you can add to a beer just from aging it in barrels, and not even just from the spirits that it comes from. Even we'll hit a point where we've used barrels 2 or 3 times. We're no longer pulling any of the spirit or the wine out, but even just having that additional time for the beer to just rest in oak and what that lends, and the dryness and the vanilla that it just pulls from the wood is pretty special. So that's something we've really started to shift our focus to in the last couple of years.
That's the barrel thing. I love anything aged in a barrel. I don't care what it is. If it's done right, the barrels offer so much complexity, especially if you're dealing with barrels of different spirits or even wine barrels, even the different types of oak, from French oak to Hungarian oak to American oak. How do you determine at what point you think you've got the best outcome? Is this a constant tasting thing for you, or have you got it nailed down to a science? Do you treat your barrels like a distillery wood, like a rick house or anything, or how do you treat your barrel aged products?
Yeah, so the running joke with us is that the beer tells us when it's done. So we don't rush anything. We keep all of our barrels. So we have our main production facility in Queens, and then we have a barrel room in Brooklyn where all of our barrel aging is done with another large tap room as well. So we'll transport the beer down there and we'll rack into barrels. That's where the majority of our barrels will sit. But it's for the most part pretty climate controlled. Every single barrel in our barrel room has one stainless nail through the front of the head, and we'll check it depending on the beer. We'll check it once every couple months. We've aged beer as long as 2.5 years in a barrel, and we had one of the first times we ever worked with. We were able to get some Lafroig Isla Scotch barrels, and we put some beer in there. And the barrels were so pungent that after about 2 weeks, we were like, we got to get this beer out of here, and pulled it right away. So it really depends on the wood and the temperature. And there's a lot, but we just kind of maintain.
That's a whole science, isn't it? When it comes to barrel aging. Yeah. I mean, I've done it on a small scale here at home with not the best results. I'm still of the opinion that small barrels, 5-gallon barrels, just don't cut it. I mean, you really got to be on top of it, only because of the amount of wood, amount of liquid, the contact science and all that. But I'm not opposed to dropping in some, barrel staves of one variety. I mean, soaking some in bourbon, and I've been through all of that and had some pretty decent results. But I dig the whole barrel aging deal, and I know it's a pretty good science. You just can't toss a brew into a barrel and wait a couple of years, think you're going to wind up with an award-winning brew. It may not work out that way, but more power to you, man. You know what, Ryan? We are going through New York on the way to Maine, so this may be another stop. Oh my God, dude, this is going to be like a 2-month trip for us in June before I get to John. My wife and I are taking off in June for the whole month to go back to Maine to visit with my sister. We're stopping at different places along the way. And a lot of these guys we've been talking to, brewers, on the show here, my God, dude, I got a list a mile long. So I'm just going to put down Big Alice Brewery on my list. And if I get to New York and you get a call from me, let's meet and have a beer.
Yeah, you've got my contact. You let me know.
Oh my God, dude! I'm telling you, Ryan's in charge of putting our A-list together here for our guests, and I'll tell you, he knocks it out of the park. And guys like you come on the show and start talking about their stuff. It's like, man, how come something like that isn't down the street from where I live? I'm in Southern California, John. I'm known as Meat House South or Southwest. Jeff is in Kansas City. He's Meat House Midwest, and Ryan, well, he's up in Minnesota. We just call that the frigid part of the country, and so we're kind of scattered all over the place. But Ryan, I want to hear more about the honey thing, the wildflower honey. Now, I know that wildflower from California is probably going to be much different than wildflower from New York. I get that. I've tasted different wildflowers from different places. How did you? Now it's interesting to hear that you have done all three, similar to what we have experienced. In our own little brew houses here. I've played around with honey in my brews at different stages, in the boil, after the boil, at 100 degrees, and I have found that high Krausen. Now, mind you, we deal more with braggots, which is a kind of a mixture of grains and honey. It's a harmonious blend, according to BJCP, of beer and mead. But typically, we brew with malts and whatnot, and you can throw in some specialty grains and whatnot. But as far as the honey addition, I have found that slow additions at high Krausen, not even all at once, just a little bit at a time until you get past that high Krausen, is where I get the most character out of the honey. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's what we found as well. It started with, it really hit us how hard these bees are working to make just such a small amount of honey and how hard they have to work. And the idea for us to throw it in early in the boil for the sake of fermentable sugars or anything like that, we kind of started to steer away from that. So we started to add it toward the end of the boil, which was nicer. We were getting more aromatics, but yeah, we've realized that adding it at high Krausen after a day or two, when it's really at its peak and we know it's going to start coming down, that's when we're going to get the most character from it, and do the best service to the honey.
How did you, it's not every brewer that adds honey to their beer. I mean, at some point, somewhere along the line, you decided, let's throw some honey in and see what it does. How did you approach that? What was that all about?
Yeah, like I said, we've been fortunate enough to work with Wilk Apiary, where he kind of saw, I mean, this is back in like 2013 now, he kind of saw that breweries were starting to play with honey. So he reached out to us and kind of planted the idea in our head of incorporating it into some of our beers. And so we kind of, it was another opportunity for us to use another local product. It's native to all around us here in the city, or the Finger Lakes, where most of our honey comes from. And it was just another opportunity for us to take this another dimension of a locally made product and incorporate it into our beers.
Now we're seeing more and more honey beers on the market coming from these craft breweries. How accepted is the honey beer that you guys are making out there in New York? I'm curious as to what people feel about it. Obviously it's not your typical beer. And I think, with mead, people, once, if they've never had it, they find out it's made with honey, they have this expectation of this nice, sweet, honey-like flavor. And a lot of times it's not. It's actually something quite different. So how are you finding people accepting the honey beer? Is it a big hit? People drinking it readily? How do you think? What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I definitely think there are people who, when you put honey on the label, they expect it to taste like honey that they would eat or put over their toast or their yogurt or whatever it is. But
yeah.
We've been fortunate enough we've done a pretty good job of the way that we've kind of branded the beers and kind of steered the way for people to think about them. They've been received really well. We one of the beers that we do for most of the year is a beer, Honey Wit. It's just a nice traditional style Belgian wit beer, coriander, orange peel, but we use honey, and that kind of adds this extra layer that most other wit beers don't have, and that's been extremely popular for us. We've entered in a couple of competitions here in New York. We won a couple medals for it, and then actually the two beers that Ryan's drinking tonight, the Queen's Farmhouse and the Bière de Ferté, both of those have actually won medals, actually, as well as the Honey Wit in the National Honey Board National Honey Competition. So awesome. People are enjoying the honey beers from what I can see.
There you go. Rolling the mic back over to Ryan. There you go, bud.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot of interesting ways to approach some of these different things. Now, you also use in one of the beers, and I don't have it in front of me. I'm not don't have it open here, but was it lemongrass and ginger? I think were two of the ingredients in the other beer. Talk about how you're using some of those herbs and spices and things like that to really hit the flavor profiles that you want.
Yeah, so that beer is the Bière de Ferté, which is translates to Beer of Pride. It's a beer that we brew every year for New York City Pride Weekend. We have a huge event, raise a bunch of money for local LGBTQIA+ local organizations. The beer started because we were looking to do this beer to raise money for Pride and these local organizations, and we had the idea to do a lemongrass ginger Belgian triple LGBT, and kind of lemongrass and ginger are two spices or herbs that we love playing with. We've done quite a few different pretty eclectic brews with them. I think they work very well together. But yeah, both of those, everything we use is always fresh, no extracts. Something like the lemongrass and the ginger is sourced and processed pretty much within a 2-day period. So we'll pick it up maybe the night before. trying to get it from a local mom and pop provider. Lemongrass is hard to find grown here in the city, as well as ginger. So we'll try and find a local produce market that's family owned and source it from them. And then, we prep it on brew day. So everything is nice and fresh, still full of all the moisture. Most of those spices that we use, I'm a big fan of late additions. So spices like that, I'll usually throw in right at 0 and just kind of let it slowly steep throughout our whirlpool, and then pulling it out right before knocking out.
Wow.
All right. Ginger is one of those that can, kind of creep up on you, or kind of go pretty quickly, I should say. When you've got it in there, I played with ginger a handful of times, and it can be tricky, because it can be fairly strong, and so when you are working with that ginger, do you find that I should say, how do you get the best out of your ginger? Are you using fresh ginger that you scuff up or cut or dried or what? I think you said that, but how would you recommend some of these, maybe on a homebrew scale, kind of approach ginger?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're always fresh for us. Everything we do, it's as fresh as possible. Especially ginger. Ginger has like this such beautiful, fresh zing to it that, depending on the style, it could really elevate it. Ginger's awesome. We'll buy the ginger root. What we do is we'll just take like a vegetable peeler. We'll peel off all the like the outside, just the barky part of it. And then we will take a nice sharp knife. We'll kind of slice it into nice thin slices. That ginger is so full of moisture inside of there that we found that kind of nice thin slices keeps all of it. And I feel like you're able to extract more of it than if you were to kind of cut it up into chunks. But yeah, we kind of cut it in nice thin slices and right in the whirlpool.
Excellent. As I'm looking at the clock here, Jeff, what would you like to add before we need to let John go?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, I know you mentioned you're using mostly wildflower honey from the New York area. Are you noticing any kind of seasonal variation in the flavor, like the sweetness of the honey, or year-over-year variation? And does that affect your recipes, the way you approach those?
I would love to say yes. I'm starting to dive more into honey and kind of how it changes over the years. We're starting to kind of look at that more. It's not something I'm able to kind of pinpoint right now, with the exception of we may notice seasonal differences in the color. As far as the tasting characteristics, not that I can tell. I would imagine my beekeeper would probably tell me very differently though.
That's understandable, sure.
John, there are so many more beers on your list that I want to talk about, but you know what that means? That means you get a chair all to yourself, with your name on the back, with a reserve sign on it, and we're going to have you back.
Sounds great.
Dude, I'm telling you, the barrel program, I'm looking at the barrel aged, the bottle list you got here. I mean, dude, this stuff is like right up my alley. I mean, I would love to taste each one of these. But I tell you, we have just flat run out of time for a little bit over time, but hey, don't worry about that. It was a blast talking to you. I love having you on the show. Please come back. And tell us about your website. Where can we find your beers if you're in the New York area or surrounding states? I mean, New York ain't all that big. How can we get to Big Alice?
Yeah, so www.bigalicbrewing.com. You can find us on all social medias at Big Alice Brewing. We self-distribute mainly throughout the city, but we're actually currently shipping our beer all throughout New York State. So if you live in New York State, you can visit our website and we can ship beer directly to your home.
If I could only get somebody from Big Alice to self-distribute to my house in Southern California, but hey, that's a discussion for next time.
You got a guy for that. You know my email.
There you go. John, thanks so much for joining us here at the Mead House, buddy. You are definitely coming back.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, take care.
Thank you, John.
Wow.
Thank you.
Cool, man. I'm telling you, here's another one. The honey beer, the barrel age program. And for our listeners out there, man, I hope you guys are out there with pad and paper or pen and paper and taking notes, because John's dropping nuggets right and left if you paid attention from the whole honey thing. Now, I especially, Ryan, like how he's dropping his honey. He gets the best, he thinks, out of Heikrausen. So do I.
Yeah, that's the first, I believe, the first commercial brewer who has told us that.
Yeah,
I think he might be. I mean, I'm thinking back, and it's nice to hear that, because I mean that's something that we've known for a long time, but it can scare some of the big brewers who are used to saying, "Hey, nothing's in the fermenter that's not boiled."
Yeah.
Well,
Jeff,
and if he's not the first to tell us that that's explicitly how he does it, I think he's definitely the first to tell us he's tried it multiple ways and found, Heikrausen is the way we do it.
Yeah,
it's just
right.
The best.
Yeah. I think most of the people that we've talked to have tried it different ways, but nobody in particular really. They didn't talk about the better results doing it at Heikrausen. So that was kind of cool to hear. I kind of perked up when he started talking about that. I thought, wow, that's what I do. So that's pretty cool. Again, John Kilty from Big Alice Brewing, thanks a million, bud, for stopping by the house here. A lot of fun, and we'll definitely have John back. Hey, St. Patrick's Day, Jeff, is like, I don't know. This is like March already, right? We're in March. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh
First
my
week of
God,
March.
it's March 2nd. Holy crap! So when's St. Patrick's Day? It's like what, like middle of March?
March 17th.
March 17th.
Yep.
So all right, so we're close enough. All right, so green beer, and I'll bet that every bar in town is probably ordering up their green beer in kegs. Breweries probably stacking them up right now. But when it comes to making mead and making braggots, no, we did this once before with the Iron Bee. That was, of course, called the MVP. And I don't know, what year was that? Was that the first one, I think? Mint Vanilla Pine?
That was the first one, 2019.
Yeah, we dealt with mint, but we didn't really harp on it. We didn't detail, go into a lot of detail about the mint. And I know we've talked about mint in past shows, even several of the real early shows. But nothing in too much detail. The one that sticks out here in your notes is chocolate mint and orange mint. Actually, two, chocolate mint and orange mint. Doesn't that sound good?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of a good place to start, I think, is where you're getting your mint from, what kind of mint you're using. Because personally, for me, I've always kind of felt that peppermint is a little too aggressively minty, like
toothpaste.
Toothpaste and Listerine. Like, and if we're putting mint and alcohol together, that's Listerine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's so. Yeah,
mouthwash. Yeah.
It's so easy, I think, to take a wrong turn with it, to overdo it. And so, I think a great place to start is just looking at the varieties of mint, because you give me a choice between peppermint and spearmint. Every time I'm going to pick spearmint. It has a more pleasant flavor to me. And I think that might be a personal preference kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of people out there that are going to tell me, no, peppermint's the better mint. It just tastes better. But I think, there are some really awesome other mints out there that, especially if you're willing to get out to these, the mom and pop seed starters and places like that are just starting to show up now that it's getting into springtime. You can find really cool stuff like chocolate mint, orange mint. I've seen so many different varieties of like little mints that have these other flavors, not unlike the hops that we're using.
Yeah.
and you can find some really cool stuff out there. I mean, I think, I don't remember if it was, I think it must have been the 2019 R&B. We also had a mead from Susan Rude that was using chocolate mint she grew in her own garden.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've tried a few peppermint meads, and that was really one of the better done ones, because I think she took a light hand with it.
Yeah. How do you go about using mint? And the mint that I'm familiar with, of course, is the one you get in the store, the leafy, smells really nice. Sometimes I just bring a bag of it home, just leave it out on the counter for a couple of days until it rots, and I throw it away because it just smells so good. So how do we treat that? What do we do to it? Can we treat it like hops and just throw it in the if we're doing a braggot, can we put it in a hop sack? And Ryan likes doing the hop back for 30 minutes or whatever at 200 degrees. How do we treat the mint? How do we do that?
Well, I think there's a bunch of different approaches to this, and I'm not sure which one is going to be necessarily the best. But absolutely, I think using fresh mint is a viable option. Either throwing in like just the leaves by themselves, or maybe muddling it up like we're going to make a mojito or something, to kind of break some of those cell walls and get more access to it. I know plenty of people make a tea out of dried mint leaves, and that strikes me as a valid approach too. Whether we're going to do like a cold steep with it, or you put that in hot brew water before you mix in the honey and all that, basically make a tea and then go from there. And that might be a viable approach too, because you can kind of control the mintiness level before you put the honey in, as opposed to trying to guess in the middle of fermentation. The other way I would think to do it is kind of a cold steep in secondary after you've basically been through fermentation, and that's an option too. And as I was putting this together, I recalled another thing we tried at the 2019 R&B was Garrett from Man Made Mead had brought a peppermint mead that he made with candy canes. Just undid a bunch of them. I think I would have to talk to him again, but I think he boiled those up and then added honey to it and fermented from there.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting flavor. I don't know if it necessarily tasted like candy canes. It definitely had a minty quality to it, but that's an approach too.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan, how would you, quickly, how would you treat mint? I mean, if you're, or what? Let me ask you this: what type of mint product would you find to use best? Fresh mint, dried mint, an extract. Amoretti is a good source for all kinds of different flavors. I'm sure they've got a whole line of mints. How would you approach a mead recipe or a braggot using mint?
Yeah. So two things there. Number one, you kind of mentioned, whether an extract or something like that, whether you're using a commercial extract or you're making your own kind of a tincture type thing. To me, that's where I like to go with the things that I'm not super familiar with. So things, even like we talked about ginger. I mean, I've used ginger a handful of times, but I know by no means, feel like I'm the ginger, expert. So things like that, I do like adding, as a tincture or an extract or something, just little by little, and tasting to get to nail it. So you don't end up with a Listerine, as Jeff says, or if you're not going for a ginger beer, you don't end up with a ginger beer. The other thing that I would look at is there are hops out there that have subtle mint tones to them or notes to them. Mm-hmm. So, as you're building your recipe, you might want to look at some addings using those hops, using the hops that are going to have the mint notes. and formulate your recipe, or as you're building your recipe, I should say, you're trying to also pull in flavors, from the other ingredients as well.
That sounds good. And like I said, Amoretti is another source. We have worked with them in the past, and we always try to mention them every once in a while. Amoretti's got a whole line of different kind of flavors that you can add. I'm sure they got a big line of mint that you can use too. That's another resource. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of goes with it. We kind of touched on it, Jeff, a little bit, chocolate and orange and whatnot. I'm looking at doing something along the orange mint line. Vanilla.
Yeah.
I'm thinking vanilla too in that orange mint vanilla thing. So how would you approach something like that?
Well, I think honestly, if I'm going to make a mead with mint in it, I'm not going to make a minty mead. And what I mean by that is I want the mead to taste of something predominantly more than just the mint. In this case, I'd probably go much more heavy in the orange and let, the mint or possibly the vanilla be extra flavors that are kind of just there to enhance it or add a little bit to it. But I want somebody that tastes it for the first time to go, oh, yeah, that's an orange mead. Mm-hmm. Not, oh, that's a minty orange mead.
So we're talking supporting actress at this point.
Right. Yeah. It's an extra little layer or an extra little something that adds to it. And not just, a major in your face minty character, because I think you've got to take a gentle hand with it.
So I'm thinking some dried sweet orange or even orange zest as the main player, and then the mint as, like I said, the supporting actress in this whole lineup, and vanilla. I think an orange mint vanilla. I think vanilla brings out the flavors of all kinds of different things.
It does.
Even like in ice cream, the 50-50 bar, orange and vanilla ice cream. Vanilla really highlights that orange. Vanilla highlights chocolate as well. So I'm thinking vanilla mixed in there somewhere as well. I think that would be an outstanding combination.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I could see something similar with, for example, like cherry and a little bit of lime and mint.
Yeah, there you go.
That sounds great, especially like a light hydromel. Again, heavy on the cherry. The lime and the mint are kind of just supporting flavors, but they add a little bit more zing and freshness to it that the cherry would otherwise be missing. And just, again, keeping it light, keeping it really refreshing. Yeah. I think that'd be a winning combination right there.
Yeah. So let's talk about, if you're using fresh mint, okay, you're talking about a plant, all right? And typically you're going to get it at the, hopefully maybe the organic section of your supermarket. If not, the regular section where they keep the fresh herbs. What do we need to do to it, if anything? I'm talking bugs and, strange little things that we don't want. How would you treat the live plant, the green, before we use it in the recipe?
Even if I'm not going to tincture it.
Actually, and is there anything that we can expect? Is there a flavor or an off flavor or something that we can expect that we didn't want as well? Maybe I should throw that in also.
Yeah, that's another good point that I'll definitely hit as well. Even if I'm not going to tincture it, I think just a brief soak in some vodka or something like that to basically just get rid of anything hanging out on the tops of the plant itself, or underneath the leaves, things like that, where we might not necessarily see it, whether it's little bugums or wild yeast, bacteria, crud like that. There is a lot of possibilities for stuff like that to get in there. So just something sanitization wise, vodka or maybe even Star San. would be my go-to there as far as just keeping that clean. If you're going to put the whole plant like fresh into the mead, the other thing you want to keep in mind is that you want to minimize your contact time. Definitely would not want to keep it there for a full week, because at that point you're losing all of the good beneficial flavors you're getting out of it, the menthol oils and the stuff that you're wanting to get, and at that point it's breaking down and you're getting more vegetal flavors, and that's where you get those weird like cut grass, but not in a good way cut grass, or sliced green pepper flavors. They're not necessarily terrible as far as off flavors go, but they're definitely an off flavor, and you want to try to avoid those whenever possible. So yeah, I would definitely, if you're going to use fresh mint, it'd be a really good policy to try and taste that daily and pull the fresh stuff probably every 2 or 3 days, just for in an ideal situation, and replace it if you feel like you need more, rather than just trying to push it and get all the mint you can out of it.
So let's wrap this segment up with the Shamrock Shake mead recipe.
Well, and this is because I have a theory. I was doing, social club, pulling posts and stuff like that, and I swear I saw like between Facebook and Reddit like 6 different people asking about mint mead, and it's not a really popular flavor any other time of the year. And I kind of went, why mint? And then I went, oh, Shamrock Shake is back.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
There you go. So what's in a Shamrock Shake besides ice cream? Cream.
Yeah, it's a milkshake, and it's got mint in it, and they put some green dye in it. So, I mean, I feel like if we're going to make a Shamrock Shake mead, which I'm not saying I'm going to, and I'm not saying it's a great idea, but for the sake of fun and creating this hypothetical recipe, I'm thinking, we need to go with mint, obviously, and the mint is going to be the star of the show in this case, so I would choose one of those fun mints, like that chocolate mint, or one of the citrusy flavored mints, probably the chocolate mint, just because it's that slight chocolate flavor is going to play nicely with all the other stuff we're going to put in there. Would definitely include some vanilla in here, because you want that kind of that reminiscent of ice cream flavor.
Yeah. What about the creaminess?
I think we're going to need
like lactose.
Definitely some lactose in here, to give it that kind of creaminess, or that mouthfeel, or at least edging towards that. I don't know if we'll get anywhere near the level of creaminess you really would think of for that, but some kind of a suggestion of that at least.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm also thinking oatmeal, soaking some oatmeal. I'm not looking for the oatmeal flavor. I'm not quite sure if this would even work. But what do you think about soaking an oatmeal grain for that creaminess? That tends to offer a creamy value, mouthfeel as well. Would you do something like that? I don't know. Somebody throw Ryan a pillow.
Sorry, I was
on mute.
Sorry, I was there for a minute. So JD, before we get into the oatmeal, your recipe there, you're thinking about the mint and the orange and the vanilla.
Yep.
You gotta just be careful you don't turn that into an orange juice toothpaste mead.
Oh, God.
Yeah, there you go. Oh my God.
So with the oatmeal, oats are a great way to bring that creaminess, or that fluffy kind of mouthfeel. You think of the New England IPAs and how those have all kinds of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are made of oats. Now, oats typically when you do those, they tend to work best in a mash.
Yeah.
So you could try to soak them on their own, but from the recipes that I've seen, they say you've got to do like at least a mini mash at least, to try to really get some of that stuff, so that some of those characteristics that you want. So, again, if you're a brew in the bag type guy or anything like that, even a really simple mini mash is, if you just do a handful, some of your grains, just some of those grains, if you did some 2-row or 6-row or something, or whatever you wanted to go with there. And then if you want to use wheat malt or oat malt or anything else you want in there, and just take like a stock pot. If you got a nice stock pot of some kind, and you just put it in the oven and set the temperature of the oven at whatever you're going to mash at.
Mm-hmm.
And you just you do it right there. It's a very simple, easy way if you're just going to do a partial mash, and especially if it's kind of cold or you don't have all the equipment to do boil outside, and then you can mix in your honey or your extract, whatever else you're doing later on. But that's I was gonna say, I started going off on a tangent there is because from what I've seen and to some level of a little bit of experience too, that the oats give you a lot better character if they're part of a mash.
Yeah. Good deal. All right. Well, I think we talked the mint thing out here for this segment, and for our listeners out there, we'd sure love to hear about anything you might be brewing for St. Patrick's Day, specifically with some mint in it. And get a hold of us, info@themeathouse.com. Let us know what you're brewing. We'll cover more ways to contact us here later on the show towards the end. But right now, it's time for the social club. This, of course, is where we try to answer some questions with no formal expertise other than what we've experienced in our own brew house, which could lead you one way or another sometimes. Picking up where we left off last week, Jeff, this is from Arcadian Nahana. Uses for acetoned mead. Any suggestions for uses for mead with off flavored acetone? Not quite sure where he's going here. Other than dumping it down the drain. Yeah, I've done that regularly. Cleaned out the sewers of L.A. I made a sour cherry apple melomel in 2018 as a newbie. Actually, sounds pretty good. When trying to use up the fruit from my yard, unfortunately, it was during a heat wave when temps were higher than 32 degrees centigrade. Not sure what that is Fahrenheit, which is higher than the temperature tolerance of the yeast that I used. During primary, it seemed like the yeast was stressed. So we're talking about stressed yeast here. Also used some black tea for some tannins. And kind of trying to read, ended up with acetone notes he's talking about here, Jeff. So without reading through the rest of the thing, it sounds like acetone's giving him some kind of a bad off flavor, and wondering how to deal with it.
Well, and I think you go through the post here. It's not necessarily how to deal with the acetone, but what can I do with this other than just pitching it? I think is the question.
Yeah.
And to kind of address where that came from, it's possible that high temperatures were contributing to this. Generally speaking, that acetone flavor you get from spoilage bacteria, whether that's some of like the acetobacter or some of the other acetic acid producing bacteria or any number of other like spoilage organisms. There are a few different pathways that you can get that those compounds that smell or taste like acetone into your meat, and usually those are all kind of contributed by those spoilage organisms. So sanitation is always an important thing to look at. Just double check, especially as a newbie, that you're getting everything as clean as possible. The fruit you're using has been camdened, and that you've got a good palate to start with, because that's generally the first place to go. Now, that said, as far as a mead with that flavor in it, man, I don't know what you'd want to use that for. I suppose you could try cooking with it. The higher temps might drive some of those flavors off, but I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't make a huge like pork roast with the cherry mead, trying to impress the in-laws first go. I'd make something for a Thursday night dinner at your house and see how that comes out first.
Yeah. Yeah, good deal. In fact, I'm not even going to go to Ryan on this because I think Jeff is our resident scientist. I don't know, Ryan, you got anything to add to that?
Nope.
Kind of a science question. Yeah. And Jeff is our resident scientist. So, all right, moving on here. I am bromin. Pectic enzyme, Ryan, and stabilizer separately or at the same time? Well, that's a question, isn't it? If separately, what first? So I have a honing, I think that's supposed to be honing brew mead, apple, ginger. What is that? Some kind of style? What is that? Honing brew?
You guys remember that the video game cookbook I was talking about back around January?
Yeah.
That's one of their recipes.
Oh, okay.
It's from that.
All right. Apple, ginger, cardamom, if I remember correctly, that is finished fermenting. And I want to add pectic enzyme to clear it. Okay, so this definitely... Okay, so be to clear it, a bit impatient. As I've read, it can also just let it set to clear as well as rack off the leaves, but also stabilize. Okay, he's... Ryan, I'm confused here. I think he might be a little confused. He's talking pectic enzyme at the end. With a stabilizer. Now, my use of pectic enzyme usually comes way up front. Sometimes even before I get to the honey and water part. What do you think?
Yeah, JD, your head's exactly where mine is on that, because pectic enzyme is something that is most commonly used right up front, just to help that break down the pectin in those fruits and really help extract more of the juices and really give you more of those materials for the yeast for the sugars for the yeast to chomp on. So yeah, oftentimes they're used up front. Now he's talking about using it as something to clear.
Yeah.
Like, the way you might add, gelatin or super clear or something like that. I'm gonna have to go back to Jeff because I don't know if pectic enzyme helps a mead or a wine be more clear even when it's done up front. But I don't know afterwards if you could do that. If you've got a cloudy mead and you throw in your pectic enzyme and maybe it can help drop everything. I don't know. That'd be a good question.
Actually,
to do.
I have to do this once.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
So I think this was the first time I tried to do a sizer, and I knew that the sizer was done fermenting. It was at 1000 or pretty close to it. Had not seen any movement on the hydrometer in weeks, and I tried hitting it with the super clear to clear it. Nothing. Super clear doesn't work if you've still got yeast activity. If the yeast are still in suspension, they're doing stuff. It's not going to work. Mm-hmm. I knew that the yeast were done, so I was flummoxed as to why the super clear wasn't doing anything. And I went and, God, what is this? It's, this was one that I had kind of let chill over the winter in the back room. Did it get a chill haze? I don't think that's possible. It didn't get, below like 60. So what is this haze that the finding agents aren't taking out? And more out of frustration than anything else, I was like, okay, well, I know I put pectic enzyme in this up front. I'll just do another dose, because I just followed the package directions from the homebrew store the pectic enzyme. So I was like, okay, well, another whatever it was, half teaspoon, something like that. I tossed in there. I mixed in. I came back, a day or two later, and it was clear finally. So,
interesting.
My thought process to this is, yeah, you should definitely use pectic enzyme up front, especially if you're using fruit that is known to be high in pectin, and apples totally one of those.
Yep.
That said, it wouldn't surprise me if the enzyme in here is able to handle a certain specific amount of pectin, and then it just stops working. So, the assumption that this amount of pectic enzyme for a half a teaspoon is going to handle all the pectin may not necessarily be correct, and it may be possible to get more clarity later by adding more enzyme and letting it work on some of those the pectin protein or whatever strands that are hanging out there and need to be broken down.
Mm-hmm.
That said, that's probably like the fourth or fifth thing I'd try after cold crashing and finding agents, and maybe, more than one finding agent. If the super clear didn't work, I might try gelatin first or something like that. Because pectic enzyme is not made for clearing mead. But it worked for me one time.
Yeah, it worked for you. So, okay. So, yeah, we'll throw that in there. So, bottom line, give it a shot. And he runs down kind of a list, pectic enzyme, rack stabilized, back sweeten, pectic enzyme stabilized, rack, back sweeten. Well, that's kind of rack, pectic. Anyway, he's got a whole list of items that he wants to try, it sounds like. So I say go for it. Go for it. And, I am Broman. If you're listening, maybe we can get Jeff to respond back to you. Let us know, what you did and what the outcome was. I'm curious.
And I think this last part, he's asking about an order here.
Yeah. In what order does he want to do this to get the best result?
It's his first suggestion here: pectic enzyme, then rack, then stabilize, and back sweeten. If he's got that much haze that he's thinking about a pectic enzyme, you want to drop that before you rack off of it.
Yeah.
And you want to do a clean rack onto your stabilizing chemical, so you leave all the yeast crud elsewhere, and it's just that much less the stabilizing chemicals have to deal with. Then you can back sweeten, and generally I find after I back sweeten, but the pectic enzyme is supposed to be the finding agent here, so I don't know. That if there's going to be another round of finding after that, then maybe then, but I don't know. At that point, my suggestions break down here.
Yeah. Bottom line, like I said, give it a shot. Let us know what happened. Would be interesting to find out what your results were. So I think we got time for one more here. I'm not quite sure. This looks familiar. I don't know if we covered this last week, but I think it's worth another shot. This is from BF something BF SHF and F. I don't know. These guys over here on Reddit, they come up with some of the damnedest names. Anyway, thoughts on a Bochet Sizer High All. I wanted to get you guys' opinion on what sorts of flavors a Bochet Sizer would have. My plan was to have the basic Sizer recipe with 71. I don't know if there is such a thing. But for the honey, just caramelize for about an hour. Do you think it'd mix, or would it be overly sweet with the apple juice already? I'm using orange blossom honey, locally bought for reference, if that matters. Thanks in advance. A lot going on in that one little question. Okay, first of all, I'll tackle this. I'll give this one a shot. Okay, the flavor is going to run the gamut based on the caramelization of your honey. Okay, think of C's candies. Okay, C's caramels. Okay, the light caramel and the dark caramel, two distinctly different flavors, but both caramels. Same thing in bourbons. I mean, you can get the same thing in bourbons, some aged tequilas. You get those caramelized flavors. Some of them you get dark, some light. Just depends on how the sugar was treated and in this case, honey. Also, the variety of honey. I think a really good Boucher sizer would be made with some caramelized avocado honey. It's got a deep, rich flavor to start with. It's not going to take a whole lot on the heat to caramelize to get, maybe a little more advanced, that marshmallowy type flavor that you might be looking for, which, is a nice character. And would it be overly sweet? Well, that kind of depends on how much honey you add, not necessarily how much apple juice that you put in. The apple juice is going to have far less sugar in it than the honey that you're going to add to it. So, and then if you get too far, you can always back sweeten a little bit, and you can do that with apple juice or honey at that point. The orange blossom honey, it's a kind of a light honey, so Boucher time or caramelized time, that's kind of going to be up to you. An hour. You can't look at it as time in the pot. You have to look at it as temperature and time in the pot. There's, that other component. So, an hour at a low heat isn't going to do a lot, but an hour at high heat, you might be developing some napalm at that point. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah. To second what you were just talking about, for this purpose, don't go by a specific time in the pot. You want to keep an eye on it, especially if you're boiling it. That's trouble right there, as honey will easily quadruple in volume as it gets to that boiling phase. Mm-hmm. What you're really looking for is just kind of keep track of where the color and the flavor is at. Keep trying it a little at a time as it's going, and look for the flavors you're looking for, whether that's more of like a light caramelization or like a dark toffee or molassesy kind of flavor. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what kind of flavors you're going to get from caramelizing orange blossom specifically. It's a lighter, more, it has some citrusy notes to it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how well those will translate once, it's seen some flame. I will say, as far as Bouchering goes, the way that I prefer to do it, the way that I've had good success with, is using a crock pot on high.
Yep.
And just find something else to do for the 4, 5, maybe 7 hours you're going to be in the kitchen, whether it's, baking a ton of bread or, making lunches for the week or whatever you can do to occupy your time. It's not a fast process, but it's something you want to keep an eye on pretty consistently.
Yeah, Ryan, your thoughts on Boucher's sizer here for BFS to whatever his name is.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a great, fall mead to me. You got the apples, you got the caramelized honey. It sounds very warming. Like something that would probably be good in making it now. It might be great to drink in the fall. Who knows? So where I would go with that is two things. Number one, where I really like Bouchers done subtly. Bouchers need to be understated. They need to be subtle. For me, that's just for me. I mean, some people probably might want to go somewhere, somewhere else. But right now, for me, I would do one of two things, or maybe even a combination of them. Number one would be I would very, very lightly Boucher the honey. I mean, the minute it starts smelling like toasted marshmallow. Now, for me, that's kind of when I know it's where I like it to be. Mm-hmm. So kind of like that toasted marshmallow scent. That's when I would take it off. And by the way, like the very beginning of that. Because when you take it off the heat, it's still going to keep cooking. Kind of like you take a steak off the grill at if you like it medium rare, take it off the grill at rare, because it's gonna come up to medium rare even though it's not on the grill anymore. There's enough, it's still cooking. So the same thing with the honey, right? Is when you just start to get the very faintest whiff of that toasted marshmallow, take it off the heat, and it's gonna get get stronger in toasted marshmallow by the time it chills. Okay. Now that you might be able to do that all the way, right? Maybe all of the honey you can do that with. The second thing I would do, or second option, would be to maybe take a little more deeper caramelized honey and use it at like 25% or maybe even 50% of the honey with raw honey. So, if you're gonna use 5 pounds of it, maybe, or 6 pounds of it, maybe 3 pounds of caramelized honey and 3 pounds of raw honey. So
Good.
Do that. And I suppose if you wanted to really, really be subtle, you could combine the two. You could say, oh, I've got some very lightly bochet honey, but then I've also got some, raw honey in there as well. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I think about it. And that's not necessarily just to a sizer by any means. I would think about that in just about any mead that I'm making. And by the way, you guys, I've got boxes coming for you guys. I've got one that I'm going to bottle here in 2 weeks. I'm kind of waiting for this to bottle, and then I'll get your boxes out. But one of them is a braggot with very light bochet honey in it, and I'll be curious to think what you guys pick up on it, because it is very different than the other bochet honey braggots that I've sent you guys in the past. This is it's much more nuanced and understated and subtle, and doggone it, I like it. So we'll see. That's kind of where I'm going from there.
Good enough. Well, hey, we're going to drop it right there. What a good show. Thanks for hanging out with us in this episode. And a huge thank you to John Kilty from Big Alice Brewing in Queens, New York, for spending some time with us. You got to check his place out. We'll put the links up in the show notes. Hey, you want to get on the show? Hey, it's easy enough. All you got to do is just let us know what you're brewing. Email us info@themeadhouse.com, or send us a message on that old Facebook deal or Twitter thing, both at The Mead House, and we'll set up a date, and we'll get you on the line and talk to you about your brewing projects. Next week will be show number 6 in our 6-week set, so the last one will be on 2 weeks hiatus after that. Ash Fishbein from Sap House Hobbs Brewing will be with us, and we'll be wrapping up the honey beers set that we've been discussing all this set, this 6-week set with Ash, because he's got one called Wannabe, and we'll talk to him next week a little more about his brewing process and using honey at Hobbs Brewery and at Sap House as well. So much more to come next week. So that's it for this episode. Happy mead making out there. Alexa, flip the lights off. Jeff, I'm sorry, but you still got to slam the door shut, because I just can't get her to close the door. We'll be back next week with episode 192 of The Mead House. We're gone.